Good afternoon and good morning, Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I am Angie Juarez Monger. I'm a Wellness Court Specialist, and I work alongside Chris. So we're excited that you have joined us today. Next slide. Okay. So we're going to start with talking about some of the data component to Healing to Wellness Courts, and then we're going to finish our webinar with the success stories that Chris began telling us about. But as a part of our 10 Tribal Healing to Wellness Court key components, number 8 is monitoring and evaluation. And this particular component consists of 3 measurements. We have a process measurement, performance measurement, and then an overall evaluation. Together, these measures ensure that wellness courts are meeting program goals, identifying improvements that may be needed, ensuring that participants are progressing through the program successfully. And it also helps share information, and that could be to tribal councils, to your tribal community, or your funding agency. Individually, process measurement will describe how the program is doing. And some of the things included there are program goals, speaking directly to what your program is intending to do. Target population, are you serving the people that the program is intended to serve? Treatment efficacy, meaning are the needs of your participants being met as identified by assessment? Are cultural practices being used? We also have core processes that are measured here, meaning are participants admitted in a timely fashion? Is testing occurring and are services being provided? Are behaviors being addressed? Which are your incentives and sanctions? We also have units of services. Are participants getting services that they need? Are they in compliance with program requirements? We also have the measure of teamwork. Is your Tribal Healing to Wellness Court team functioning together as a whole to make the program successful? And then lastly, we have community support. Do you have that? How to gain that? But these are the measures that are all included in process measurement. Then we have performance measurement, which is the measure of programmatic activity. Ideally, it would be at the end of your program. And the things that you're looking at are retention. What is your rate? Are your participants completing programming, or are they dropping off along the way? And if so, when is that happening? What is the program structure at that time that you may be losing participants? We also look at sobriety, which is the length of sobriety or sobriety trends among your participants. We look at recidivism, which is looking at reoffense while in the program or even after the program. And how do participants compare to those who are not in your wellness court? What seems to be the case that we often see is that participants do better with just a little bit of wellness court than none at all. So we know that Tribal Healing to Wellness Courts work. But also under performance measurement would be units of service. What services are working and are they showing to be effective for your program or particular participants? And then the third component to monitoring and evaluation is an overall evaluation. And these are very useful for a specific purpose. So funding requests, you're trying to show that your program is working. Maybe you want to do a program spotlight, the tribal newspaper or local news, or program anniversaries. Your wellness court has been in operation for 1 year or 5 years or 15, or we're now seeing 20 and 25 years. So it's looking at those like special release kind of information. Okay. So to complete these measurements that we just talked about under monitoring and evaluation, we collect data. So data collection is gathering specific pieces of information, and you want to do this frequently and along the way. And then we have data reporting, which translates those pieces of information into usable information. What does it mean for your program and for your tribal community, for your participants? And you want to do this frequently, but you might have an additional requirement there. If you're a grant funded program, you probably have a requirement to report quarterly. So data reports occur quarterly, or it could be semi-annually, which means it would be a data report and a short narrative to go with that. Or maybe you're responsible for a tribal monthly report that gets submitted to an executive officer or to tribal council. Then you have data analysis, and it transforms all of this information into an insight. And you want to think about the purpose that you're analyzing your Healing to Wellness Court data. Who's the audience? Why are you doing it? What are you trying to showcase? So those are all things that you would think about when you're doing data analysis of your Healing to Wellness Court program. So it's how we make sense of our local information and highlight accomplishments or even address challenges. On this next slide, we have an example of this data reporting. So for our example here, we have 3 in our program. All 3 were tested for substances. 0 tested positive. 0 did not complete the program, which means they did not end early. 3 successfully completed. And of those 3, 1 of them completed within 13 to 18 months after start, and the other 2 completed 19 or more months after start. So as you can see, it's very dry information. It's very black and white. It's just to the point of what's going on in your program. But it doesn't really tell us much about our Wellness Court program aside from these numbers. But this is where we add the storytelling. This is where we get a different picture. We enrich the description of the Wellness Court program success. We can show how it's affecting each participant. We can also describe how it's positively affecting the tribal community as a whole. So in and of itself, data is very to the point, just the numbers. It doesn't really tell us. So even though 3 might seem like a little number, a small number for a Wellness Court size, what it's also not telling us is that all participants completed this particular Wellness Court program in the example. All of them successfully completed all of their requirements. This is why it's important to have that storytelling part when we're reporting on our power of this storytelling. And we'll hear from 3 Wellness Court alumni who have volunteered to share their stories. So before we get started, I will turn it back to Chris and she will start us on our stories.
Thank you, Angie. You make data collection sound very good. So as Angie has pointed out, when we always don't have that opportunity to enter in stories like this, and it's kind of dry, but this is what our tribal councils, our tribal administration, people in our community are the success stories. And so this is one of the ways that we wanted to bring them to you. And just to set a little context, we work nationally with several other technical assistance and training partners. And some of the data that they're collecting, and we haven't really seen it very much in tribal communities, but some of the data that is out there nationally is that women are underrepresented in problem-solving courts. In adult drug courts, and these are in larger jurisdictions such as non-tribal jurisdictions. For some reason, Native or women just are not doing well in those problem-solving courts, meaning that they're not getting into the courts or they are not completing the courts. Well, we're here to tell you different in Tribal Healing to Wellness Courts because we have 3 amazing women who have gone through their own individual Healing to Wellness Courts. And they come to us from very different parts of the country and very different backgrounds. And one of them, and when she gets ready to speak, I'll let you know, one of them has even become a Healing to Wellness Court Advocate of the Year, which was last year, and that was Kylie. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to call on Francesca Smith, who's coming to us from Upper Michigan, right, Francesca? And she will share her story with you, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself. Take it away, Francesca.
Ani bonjour. I'm going to introduce myself. Swe, Shkode, Chipwa, Arawa, Ninwa, Parawarmi, Enda, Tachingabing, Nanandun Jaba, Hanavel, Ninwa, Wakanaksing. Vidadaske, Nindora, Pataski, Kichigami. Makwa Dorem, Nimi Miguan, Jashko, Kwe, and also Francesca. I said I am 3 fires. I'm Chippewa, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. I am from Hannibal. That is where my spirit first sounded, along the water. Wakanuxing is Crooked Tree. That's where we all gathered here in the 5 Great Lakes. Where I live today is in Petoskey, Michigan. And Petoskey means first light. It's the first light you see, the sunlight or the light coming through the clouds. I am Bear Clan. I am Dancing Feather Blue Sky Woman. And I'm also Francesca Smith. Nice to meet you. I would like to get started. So I am from Hannibal, Michigan, born and raised on Potawatomi Reservation in the Upper Peninsula. I'm still in part of the northern Michigan over in Petoskey, but below the bridge. My journey began, my birthday is June 22nd, 1986, and born under a full moon. I was raised by my grandmother. She was a single grandmother. She was full blood Odawa, from here, from where I'm at in Petoskey, Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. My grandpa was an alcoholic, and she stayed married to him for I think like 40 years. They met when she was like 15, 16 years old, and they had 15 kids. And my mother was number 9 out of the 15 kids. My mother had 4 kids. My dad had 2 plus 3 with my mom. So I am the 3rd daughter of my mother, and she was Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi also. I don't want to get lost in my thoughts. My dad was an addict too. I was not raised by my dad. He now has like 20 years of sobriety, but I do not have a relationship with him. So yeah, I was raised by my grandmother. She was not an alcoholic. She didn't drink or smoke. She didn't do any of those things that I grew up with. At 5 years old, I think my first traumatic experience was even before 5 years old. When I started experiencing like alcoholism as a child around me was right from birth. My uncles, I had an uncle who was an alcoholic, and all his friends would be over and they would party all the time. The first time, I think it was like 3 or 4, I remember my cousin saying, "I love you, my cousin." And that was the last time he ever said that. That was the last time I ever seen him. He got in a drunk driving car accident that night. I guess I jump over to like 5 years old, with experiencing like foster care and CPS. I never went to foster care, but my brother did. I didn't get to grow up with any of my siblings. I just grew up with my grandma. My oldest sister grew up, she was adopted. My second sister, Candy, she grew up in Florida with our dad for the first 13 years of her life. My 2 older brothers were adopted out, and my little brother was adopted out. So I didn't get to grow up with any of them. But I do remember when my mom had my youngest brother, that was one of my first heartbreaks, experiencing CPS coming and taking him and me hiding in a closet with him. I thought my mother was my aunt. I used to call her aunt. And then one time I found out that she was my mom. And that was really hard for me to comprehend, because I always thought she was my aunt. My grandmother was my mom, and it was not that at all. So I got kind of, I changed after those things happened to me. My first time I experienced racism was, I was in 2nd grade, and I was called a white girl, and I knew that it was bad. And I went back and I told my grandma, I said, "Grandma, what's a white girl?" And then she told me, you know, who I was and my nationalities and to be proud of myself. It was really hard. The next year I was in 3rd grade and I was called an Indian girl, a dirty Indian girl at school. And that was fighting for me at that point. There was some boy and he pushed me and I pushed him back. And that's when I started fighting for my skin color. It was 8 years old. That was pretty hard for me. So growing up and not having parents, it really changed like who I was. And I started to learn mom and dad and family and, you know, grandma was learning about our native ways. I was learning about church and all these things, you know, starting to grow and live life. And I didn't like going to church. I didn't like being around other people that had families. I didn't like a lot of things. I didn't like myself. I thought it was ugly. And I felt like I was a nobody. I felt alone. Everybody, you know, around me had their siblings, but I did not have mine. It was hard. I was angry. It really messed with my head a lot. My grandma tried everything she could to help me be proud of myself and become a successful young lady. And I just couldn't understand what she meant by that. And so when I was 12, that's when everything started happening. The drinking, I started smoking weed and cigarettes, hanging out with older kids. I started getting promiscuous. And my first, I guess, suicidal ideations was at age 13. It was also the year that I became pregnant with my first daughter, Anna. That's my happiness. Moving forward with my teen years was, I just started, you know, from drinking and smoking and being in the relationships. They were not healthy relationships. They were very toxic. I grew up with a lot of domestic violence, watching my aunt and my uncles and community members full on fist fight each other and hurt each other, and being little and running out of homes and jumping out of windows and running in the woods and running for safety. That was terrifying. And I grew up like that. And then when I became, you know, who I was and having a relationship, I started thinking that's how a relationship was supposed to be. So I started, you know, fighting and finding myself in domestic violence situations. So moving forward, I was 16. I went to Florida. My sister was a runaway, and my second child's father was on the run because we were drinking and we ran out of alcohol and they wanted to go get more. So they thought it was a good idea to go and break into the local store. And they did that. I did ask them. I was screaming and I was yelling and I didn't want to do that. I was telling them to let me out of the car. So they left me on side of the road and they went and they broke in the store. They got their alcohol. And later on, you know, they picked me up on the side of the road and they got in trouble. And it was also the year I first experienced real drugs like cocaine, crack cocaine, heroin. It was the first time I ever seen like pimps, prostitutes, people digging out of the garbage to eat, selling stuff in the flea markets. It was really different lifestyle than what it was back home on the res. That was in West Palm Beach, Florida. And that's where my dad was from. I did not stay with my dad down there. I ended up staying in a flower shop. I ended up staying with crackheads. I guess you could say my dad's crackhead friends. I didn't have anywhere to go. And later on that year, I became pregnant with my second child, my firstborn son. And then moving on, when I was 17, I found out my mom had cirrhosis of the liver. So by the time I was 21, she had passed away from that. When I was 24 years old, my grandma had passed away. and I didn't have her anymore. I started to become on my own. I started, I lost my uncle with suicide at the age of 18, and that was where my opiate addiction took off. And it was really bad from there. But so hitting 20 and 21, I gave birth to 2 more sons. And then I struggled with sobriety. My grandma came to me. I wasn't living there at the time before she passed away. And she said, Francesca, can you come take care of me? I'm getting old, and you promised that you said you would take care of me when it was my time. And I said, okay. So I struggled with, I went back to the res, and I struggled with learning how to be sober. I was working on my GED and things like that. And anyways, I struggled with addiction, with helping to take care of her and raise my kids and all the things that come with that. So I struggled for a long time until 2000. Well, she passed away in 2011, but I finally went to treatment for my first time in 2012. And I successfully completed all of their things. My kids were taken by CPS, and for 2 years, I fought really hard to get them back. That was the very first time I ever tasted and ever felt sobriety and learned about meetings. So I stayed sober from 2012 to 2014. I started to do stuff again in like 2015, and that was the same year I entered college, and I didn't finish it. 2017, I wanted to get sober again, and I went to a meeting on my own, so I was out of recovery for a while. I was struggling with the wanting to be sober, and I was, but then those toxic relationships come around, and I just kept slipping. And so 2019 came, and I had made this decision that I got evicted from my home. I was relapsing again. My kids were getting split up, being in different homes. I was homeless, and I made this decision that I was going to move to Petoskey, Michigan, to find sobriety. And I've never been here. I just been here I never lived here. I only was here like visiting with my grandmother as a child. But something spoke to me in my head as I was sitting on my sponsor's couch, and she said, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to Petoskey. And I did. So I come to Petoskey, and I start, working. And I was in domestic, but I started working with an advocate. I started to work on changing my life. And then 2020 happened. And that's when everything felt like it was going to everything was falling apart for me at that point. I had a lot of things going. I was going to college. I had a home. I had a job. My kids were in school. They were, doing their sports things. Like everything was going great. And all of a sudden, everything stopped. I stopped. I freaked out. I didn't have a sponsor down here at the time. I still had my one up north. I didn't know how to get to meetings. I didn't know anything. And I didn't have a very good recovery community going for me when I first got here. So I ended up drinking. And then next thing you know, I had the red and blue lights behind me, September 13th, 2020. And I feel like that was definitely the ancestors looking out for me, because that's when everything changed for me in my life. And then that January coming up, that was my second OWI. That was my second OWI. So January comes around, January 2021, I get into the state sobriety court program. And it was terrible for me. It was a really rough start. I really wanted to be sober, but I really didn't want to do the work. I wasn't able to drive. I didn't have a recovery community yet. I was still a mess in my head. And I I had racked up all these violations in the first week of the state tribal sobriety court, and the probation officer, now that's a part of the tribal sobriety court, he was working at the place I was going to these, the outpatient stuff or whatever they were doing. And he said, you know, they have a tribal sobriety court program. Maybe you could look into that. And I was like, no, but I'm state though. And he's like, I know, but they can transfer it. All you have to do are these are the steps. So I gave it some thought, and I put down my tobacco, and I said my prayers, and I wrote, I tracked down the emails for the director of probation, the probation officer. I mean, I went all out, and I did that for myself. They did accept me. It took a month, and I got accepted. And that's when, you know, my journey began. I got picked up a new sponsor down here in Toski. I still to this day have my same sponsor from 2017. She never left my side. I think everything that I prayed for and that I cried for that I didn't even share through the times of my life before that was, I would cry a lot, even using by myself. I would cry. I would tell my kids, you know, this isn't the place for us. We're going to move somewhere. This isn't how life is. I begged God, and I meant that. Like, when I very first went to jail, I did a fake beg to God where I just wanted to get out of jail. Now, years later, I'm begging because I really, really wanted that change. So when I was entered into the wellness Wapshki Miigwan program, that was everything I prayed for all of those years, even as a kid. And I begged God, you know, I didn't want to be woken up from drunks anymore. I didn't even share, you know, the things about, you know, like having sexual abuse. I've had that happen to me too. I've been taken advantage of while drunk. I was taken advantage of as a child, and by family members too. And those things, so this program being accepted, they said, oh, it's going to be really hard. I said, that's okay. I said, I really want is the spirituality. I said, I've worked treatment program before, and it doesn't work for me. I tried it that way. You know, I just don't feel comfortable. I don't feel like a part of, like, I don't want to talk. I don't want to share. I want to get sober, but I don't want to do those things. When I hit the program, it changed my life. There was the fires, the phase fires. I don't know if all of them are like that, but we have phase fires up here. And we did the Wellbriety. We did the workbook, the MRT, the Alcoholics Anonymous, big book. We did the 12 steps. We did the traditions. We did it all. And at first it was really hard, and I was almost wanting to back out. And the more I had to look into myself, the more I became, you know, I was starting to fight myself. But each phase fire we had was, I think those are some of the most healing experiences I had. And I started to learn to work my relationship with the Creator in my own way. Had nobody to judge me, had nobody tell me that I was doing it wrong, that I had to be this or I had to be that. Oh, I can't get sober. Because I had all of those things said to me up north. I couldn't stay sober up there. And down here, I was cheered on for being a mom. I was always cut down for being a mom. I was shamed for being a mother. And here, we're taught, you know, we're the creation, and women, you know, and all female things are of creation. I learned that while in the program, and to be proud of who I am, and that it's okay to be a mom with 6 kids, you know, because not everybody gets to have that. And I met a lot of great people. I started a talking circle down here, and it's still going. I started that in 2021, and I didn't start it because I wanted to. I felt led by the Great Spirit to do that. And today it's a very successful talking circle that's for everyone in the community. And a lot of people find their higher power. To a lot of people, that group is their home group, and they're not Native American, but that's okay, you know, because it also says in the prophecies, I didn't even read that part of the book before I started reading, but we all come together as a whole around the whole world and be accepting of each other. I learned so much from all the elders down here. We call them aunties, the Moyas. I got to do a water ceremony for fighting the pipeline. I did the water ceremony. I never done those things back home. And I grew up on a reservation and I was excluded. I was always told, you're not a part of this tribe, go back to your tribe. And I was told this since I was like 7 years old in first grade, that I wasn't a part of their tribe because I wasn't a tribal member. But I could be if I wanted to be. I stayed with Little Traverse Bay Band where I'm at right now in Petoskey. I chose to stay here and I'm so glad that I did. It changed my life. I learned how to make cedar mats. I learned about bull rush with some of the best women around, northern Michigan. I got to learn about honor the boarding school. My grandmother was a boarding school survivor. She was born in 1935. She went to the boarding schools and down here in Harbor Springs, and the terrifying things that she said, like cutting her eyelashes and whipping her and cutting their hair off and belittling them and beating them up and hurting them and slapping them, and they couldn't even speak their own language. And I heard about this growing up from just my grandma. And it wasn't until I came to Petoskey and I was at the behavioral health one day and they had orange and I was like, oh, what is that? And they were like, we're honoring the children of, the survivors, the ones that passed on, the ones that are still here. And I got to be a part of that and put flags down and be part of the ceremony. And that was so huge. I did that, learning that through the program. I got to go to their sobriety feasts. I got to have a lot of pictures, that I look at of learning our heritage, our culture, the words, songs, teaching them to my kids, and just learning how to navigate who I am as a person. I am Francesca, I am three fires, I am keepers of the faith, I'm keepers of the fire, I'm keepers of the trade, and I am a mother. I am a mother. That's my first thing before anything I was told. I am a mother. That becomes before anything else. I learned from the program who I am, how to stand up for myself, stand in my own truth, my true authentic Francesca, with peeling every single layer from like the onions, the ego, and all of those things that we build up and we put around us from our addiction, from our upbringing. And they learned how to help me tear those walls down, because where I came from, we'd always say you're weak. And if you were weak, they could tear you alive. They could use you and abuse you. And if you didn't have these walls up, you weren't tough. And down here, I got to break all that. I got to be who is Francesca, who is the real her, and what do I like, and what kind of woman do I want to be. And today I know who I am. I know how to stand in my truth. I know how to advocate for myself. I am a great resource. I am a great mother. And I am from Wakanuxing, and I'm very proud of that. And with that, I am so grateful. I am so thankful. The program has tremendously changed my life. I had great visions during that. I've seen the traditional healer all of the time. I've done things and learned things. I didn't know that I could sew. I didn't know that I could bead. I didn't know that I could make bulrush mat. I didn't know any of these things. And I learned all of this through the Wellness Court program. And they taught me how to even be okay with eating with police officers and prosecutors. And I was never okay with that. But now I am. And now I'm okay with the law, because I used to be scared and now I'm not. Now I know. Everything that was negative got turned into a positive, and I started to learn how to use that and navigate that into my life, and self-awareness, the spiritual awakenings that come, finding my community, my sponsor, owning the recovery chapel, from her saging. And I didn't know, I seen her trying to sage one day. She's not native, and I went up there and I was like, can I help you with that? And she's like, yes. And then, so I got to teach her how to smudge, our way. And then she had me, smudging on her last Sunday, which is self-care. And then I would, I mean, I never seen non-natives honor us like that up north or anywhere else the way that we are honored here in Petoskey. And it's so great to be, a half breed, because I am. And I feel beautiful in my own skin now. I'm okay with me. And I'm grateful for the probation officer I had, because she works with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute now. And I always talked, good about her, and I always felt good about her, and she helped me, everything, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially. She helped me figure those things out. And she, as a probation officer, she just guided me. I wasn't just somebody that was like, slapping the handcuffs on me for something, or she just really worked with me. Like that was definitely a good job for her. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that she's moved on, because now I'm here talking with you, and otherwise I wouldn't be here. But thank you. I'm grateful. And with that, I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca. I think you have given us an example of what a process it is, and the work still that goes into it too. So thank you very much. So our next person is Kylie, and Kylie Francis Fowler, and I want to acknowledge her. Kylie was one of our Healing to Wellness Court advocates last year in 2023. We honored her by presenting her with a blanket and an award. And an advocate for Healing to Wellness Court is just that. She's pushing the torch of Healing to Wellness Courts. And so she's going to share her story with us. Welcome, Kylie.
Thank you, Chris. Hi there, everybody. My name is Kylie Francis Fowler. I am Penobscot, Brenawabskig from Indian Island, Turtle Island here, as well as Wolastoqui up Nation up in Woodstock, New Brunswick, Canada. Healing to Wellness Court to me has, I can't talk about it enough. Growing up, I was the oldest of 3 siblings. I grew up with, my mother and father and other family members, drinking a lot and partying. And in a sense, I kind of I thought that lifestyle was fun and it looked exciting. And I wanted to hurry up and grow up and start drinking and partying. And it was normal. I thought it was a badge of honor to sit there and brag that I was a felon at 14 years old. At 12, I remember my mom and father separated, and I was too much to handle on one side and didn't have a space to go on the other parent. So I lived with actually a family over here on the reservation. He was the chief of police at the time, and his older daughters, they were older than me. And then at 14, I had a surgery for my wisdom teeth, and that was where prescription Oxycontin was introduced to me. That surgery started, it really ignited something I think that was already in me, that predisposition of addiction, that the family dynamics, the environment I grew up in, idolizing the drinkers and the partiers. And I didn't realize what I was getting into. At 14, I had to go and live at this kids' peace place for a few months. I was officially diagnosed with a polysubstance abuse dependency at 14. Let's see. And At 17, I had a traumatic experience with losing my father that triggered me into IV use of heroin for the first time. And yeah, in my 20s, it was, it went from OxyContin, then that turned into heroin. I've survived. I like to the bath salt epidemic in New England and Maine that had a real big impact on my soul. I tried recovery for other people. I tried it because my mother wanted better for me. I tried it because I remember I was 18, maybe 19, my little brother sitting there begging and pleading and crying to me that he didn't want to bury me. And it still wasn't enough. I tried recovery for all the wrong reasons prior to. I had a soul disconnection. I didn't have a purpose. I was very, really lost, and I didn't have emotions to put to, all these big feelings that were going in me. Emotional regulation was not a strong suit for myself or my family. And, the historical trauma that's been there in our, generations. Like my father was removed from his mother's home from Canada, and he was raised in homes down in South Boston. He was one of 8 children that were removed from her, and they were all separated, all the way from Sacramento over here to the East Coast. And I didn't get to meet all of my uncles because, some of them lived far away, or one of them passed away early, due to some, health illnesses because of addiction. But I know my father had some, traumatic experiences growing up as a really dark brown boy in the 70s in homes and youth correctional centers. And I know that the pain that he carried, it went through to me at that age, at 17, when I lost him. I didn't realize that, I was very, very stuck in my addiction. The addiction had full grasp on me. A lot of my 20s were a blur. We'll fast forward a little bit to 2020. The COVID hit, but to me, I was already living in isolation. So I was already not going to places because my addiction was that bad. Like the only places I left was to go to pick up or come back home. It's like COVID wasn't even a thing because I didn't go out anywhere anyways. And that was like the worst. In 2021, March 21st of 2021 is when I decided to put myself into a detox program. I packed up a bag because I knew once I left my apartment that day, I wasn't going to be back for a while, because I knew I was very, very sick. I knew that my soul was reaching out for things, and I knew that I really had to seek help from elsewhere and professionals. So I went to a program down in southern Maine that then sent me to another program, a bed-to-bed, directly after that. And then from there, I went to another bed-to-bed to a sober facility in Portland, Maine. And that's when I got linked up with my case manager here at the Healing to Wellness Court program. I remember he gave me a call, and I realized kind of who he was from the community. And I'm like, okay, all right, I can do this. I can do this. I was able to get in, as an, intake for the program, but like, it was all on Zoom at first. So it wasn't great. I'd be lying if I said that I went through and I was a star, participant. I was not. It took a few sanctions for me to realize that, like, and put some faith that these people truly cared about me. These people wanted good for me. This was something that was kind of foreign to me. So I fought it for a little bit. But being asked if I needed anything, I used to think getting help was vulnerable, of being weak, until I realized, like, I was only hurting myself by not accepting help or asking for help. And these people truly saw me as a whole person. You know, I was able to get introduced to Wellbriety. I facilitate a Wellbriety meeting here in my community weekly. I fill in, you know, at the local recovery centers if I need to. I'm really, really connected to my community now. You know, I don't walk around with that shame, and that guilt, and that label I used to put on myself here in the community anymore. I love being able to be proud that I'm a person in recovery. I love to be able to say that Healing to Wellness Court was really pivotal in my life. I love it when other community members message me or come up to me and be like, all right, so like, how do I get some help, Kylie? How do I, like, where do I go? Is there a meeting? Or, hey, come, like, you know, something like that. Like, I get to see other people come into this program and like their lives are taken back, you know? I was at the last phase in this position opened up in the Wellness Court as a peer recovery advocate. I applied a little hesitantly. My case manager's like, you're perfect for it. And I'm like, okay. And I did. I applied and like, I'm still here. I am still here. I'm really hoping to get an alumni group or something of the sorts, you know, going eventually, just because I know how much I can accredit my success in life, like, to this program. You know, this program got me to see that, you know, there is something higher than me. There's a purpose out there, and Creators just has blessed me. And I really hope that, you know, at some point, you know, others can see how great this is. So, let's see, what else do I have starred for my things? Oh, my case manager and the judge. Being able to see the judge and like, it was definitely like kind of like a shock of how involved and how important he, you know, made me feel. So without wellness program, I don't know where I would be. So I really appreciate you guys asking me to share some of my success. That's just the tip of it. So.
Thank you, Kylie.
You're welcome.
And I'm also kind of noticing a theme that part of, you know, just at least for both of you, your experiences are interacting with court staff and law enforcement and those individuals that you didn't think you would in the past. So that's interesting. Maybe we can hold on to that and talk a little bit about that later. But I want to give the some time to our last participant, and I'm going to have Angie introduce her because Angie knows her well.
So this is Lou, who's going to share her story with us next. Lou was actually her story was shared with me from her wellness court, and I don't want to say too much because I'm sure this is all part of her presentation, but she was recommended to share her story because of all the wonderful things that she has done. So Lou, go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, Angie. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mary Lou Gutierrez. I'm going to be reading a lot off of what I've written down so I don't lose my spot or where I'm at in my story. So I'll be looking down at my notes a lot. My name is Mary Lou Gutierrez. I go by Lou. I am half Hispanic and half Navajo. My clans are Senajikane, Nishlan, Nakaitane, Bashishi, Tobaha, Dashiche, Nakaitane, Dashanale, which is Honeycomb Clan, Hispanic Clan, Water Edge Clan, and Hispanic Clan. I am 24 years old. I have a daughter that is just under 2 years old and currently pregnant with my second daughter, who will be arriving this month. I will be 2 years clean on August 2nd, and so I can start getting into my story. I've lived half my life on the reservations here in New Mexico, and also I've spent some time on the reservation in Ignacio, Colorado. I've also spent the other half of my life, you know, on and off in cities as far as Phoenix to Durango, Colorado. Unfortunately, everywhere I've lived, I was exposed to either drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, marijuana, or direct drugs. My father was an alcoholic, a smoker, and a heroin user. Soon he went to a maximum federal prison for many reasons, crimes, and his addictions. I was aware of his addictions and formed my ideas around it with little knowledge. By the time I turned 12, I was experimenting on my own, which became a regular thing quickly. Alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana. By the time I was 15, I was also experimenting with opioids and methamphetamines. My father played a role in my interest in using, but he also showed me that recovery is possible. At the age of 16, he was released from prison, clean and God-fearing. I was able to go live with him at that point in Phoenix for about 3.5 years, and he helped me get clean for the first time, which I was very, very thankful for. I also was able to join his religion and be God-fearing as well. I was able to graduate high school an A+ student, and unfortunately, there was still a downward spiral that was hiding because he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when he was released from prison. And that was just really hard for me. It was terminal. It wasn't going to be able to change. And when he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, I had a really hard time with it. I knew that his final days were coming, and I just couldn't bring myself to watch that. After him being gone for so many years, I wanted to remember all the good times I had with him, and I just couldn't bring myself to stay. So we ended up going our separate ways, and I ended up relapsing as well. So because of religious reasons and because I couldn't stay, I left. At that point, I turned 18. I came back to New Mexico and went back to using regularly. My gradual downward spiral happened again. Alcohol, cigarettes, marijuana, pills, got into meth and heroin, and then into fentanyl. I struggled to keep jobs to support my habits, so I turned to criminal activities to support my habits. My dad died in April of 2021. At that point, my addictions got worse. The less of a moral person I was, the more my conscience disappeared, the more my addictions took over. I turned away from my family and my friends. I was in and out of jail. I started to exhaust all of my resources to support my addictions. By age 22, I became pregnant with my first daughter. My boyfriend was trying to encourage me to slow down, to stop, but as much as I wanted to, I couldn't fight my addictions. When you're lost in your addictions, no matter how much you want to stop, it's very hard. It's very hard, and I didn't know what resources were out there. I didn't know what could help me at that point, and I also didn't do much to really push it and try. You can't really in my experience, I wasn't ready to stop until I hit that bottom. So multiple times throughout my pregnancy, I tried to get clean before my daughter was born, but it was very unsuccessful each time. And I was working with outpatient at that time. I was trying to do medicated treatment with the clinic in Ignacio. I was working with Dr. William Finn. But I couldn't keep up with it. So my daughter was born a month too soon and addicted to meth and fentanyl. Within days, social services stepped in and took custody of my daughter. Within a couple of weeks, my case was started. There wasn't any way to measure the amount of guilt or shame and heartache that came over me. I was finally ready to do whatever it took to get her back as quickly as possible. So that was my bottom. When I lost my daughter, I was so devastated. At that point, I got into inpatient rehab as quickly as I could. Also beginning to follow the guidelines of family treatment court and social services when my case began. After finishing a 24-day program, I realized I had made a good decision to continue working with Wellness Court. My case manager from the Division of Social Services, DSS, and at the treatment center both helped me make a very hard decision to go into long-term treatment. I didn't want to spend more time away from my daughter or her father, but I knew it was necessary to ensure a better grounding in my newfound sobriety. I thought if I do this right and I do everything in my power to stay clean, this will be the only time I have to be away from my daughter to get better. The same day I was released from the 24-day center, I went to long-term and started my 120-day inpatient treatment. I was then completely able to focus on completing everything recommended by the courts, case managers, DSS, probation, and everything from the treatment center. I completed 2 phases of family treatment court and rehab, 2 parenting classes. I was given time slots at the rehab to help teach classes. I worked on 12 steps. When I found a sponsor, I was able to attend NA meetings as much as I wanted, along with so much more. Working with Wellness Court and working the program, Family Treatment Court really helped me stay on track, create and attain so many goals. They aided so much in my sobriety successes. I didn't feel discriminated against. I wasn't pushed to the side. Wellness Court, probation, DSS, and myself all working toward the same goal as a team to maintain sobriety and reunification. I was able to return home after I graduated rehab. I was able to be in the same home as my daughter because my mother volunteered to take care of my daughter while I went to treatment. All the support I received played a very big role in my sobriety. I thank my family, my partner, Judge Whistler from Ignacio, my caseworkers, my therapist, peer support workers, Dr. William Finn, probation, my sponsor, Narcotics Anonymous, Santa Fe Recovery Center, and many groups that I've attended or worked with. My success didn't stop after I finished rehab. It was just the beginning of a new founded way of life. I started treatment August 2nd, 2022. I finished treatment December 23rd, 2022. Once I returned home, I continued to work the family treatment court program. I did every group or class suggested. I did therapy, NA meetings 5 days a week, bi-weekly in-person court attendance, bi-weekly drug tests. By June of 2023, I got a job helping me move to phase 3 of 4 in family treatment court. August came around and I enrolled in college part-time while still being a full-time mother. In January of this year, I completed family treatment court and was able to close my DSS case. My partner and I regained full custody of my daughter. I finished my college classes, making me a fully certified medical lab assistant and a phlebotomist. My biggest accomplishment so far is getting my family back. I was so happy about that. Welcoming my second daughter in just a few weeks and still living clean and strong. I will have 2 years clean August 2nd of this year. I would like Wellness Court and any other tribal justice practitioners to know that after so many cases, it's very easy to become desensitized towards addicts, seeing them as just another statistic. So I conclude with asking, please don't lose sight of why you have the jobs you do. You have the ability to make a difference in any addict's life if you continue to have compassion, empathy, patience, and encouragement. Everyone I worked with who showed they really wanted to help made a huge impact on my recovery journey. And that's all I have to say for today. And thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate being a part of this webinar and sharing my story.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lou. And thank you for that moment of gratitude to the practitioners of Healing to Wellness Court and judicial programs. I think, sometimes I know I used to be a probation officer, and when I had probationers, sometimes people thought, well, I just pulled their name out of a hat just to mess with them for a year. But I think that you know, it's hard to see in the moment what the bigger picture is, but you all are very, very strong examples of what that is. So we have some time. We have probably about 9 or 10 minutes for questions from anybody in our audience. You can either put them in the chat, or you can come off on camera, right? Chelsea, I want to make sure that I'm giving the right instructions, that they can come off camera or they can unmute and ask a question. We have a couple in the question and answer box. We have one that says, "Thank you so much for sharing so courageously, and thank you all for your stories. Congratulations to you all." Those are some comments in the question and answer boxes. So from Rhonda, we have Rhonda is asking, what was the hardest part of the program? Francesca, what was the hardest part of the program for you?
One of the hardest parts was, I think my family tree. And the reason why it was so hard for me, I didn't really get to elaborate, but I lost a lot of family. And so when it came to make the family tree, I had a hard time with that. I think that's one of the biggest things that kept me in my addiction, was the loss of family members and community members, because it wasn't just family, it was community too. That was the hardest part. And I didn't like their format. It was really tough, but I got through it and I stuck with it. And yeah.
Thank you for your honesty, Francesca. How about you, Mary Lou? What was the hardest part of Wellness Court for you?
The hardest part of Wellness Court was the initial, wrapping my head around, okay, I'm stopping my drug use. The detox was really, really rough. It was really hard. Also, the medicated treatment was very hard to work with. I was getting Sublocade injected into, it's like a shot you get in your stomach. It's super painful. It was really hard to go through every month. And also having to learn how to be a functioning member of society again. I needed to make a schedule. I needed to be on time for all of my classes, all my groups. I needed to be punctual. I needed to learn how to talk to people when, I spent years in a room just stuck in my own mind. It was really hard to get back into being a functioning member of society.
Wow. Thank you for that, Lou, because there's a lot of that in Wellness Court. And I think those of us who have put Wellness Courts together, we kind of intentionally do that, is so you can bring people out of that isolation. Because as a drug and alcohol abuse counselor for 20 years, and I don't come in from a recovery background, but we know that isolation is one of the things that keeps addiction going. Kylie, what was the hardest part for you?
Hi there. Looking back on it, like I would have been with Lou on that one, with the whole, just stopping that, having to come in and, not be isolated. But come to realizing, like, the more I look at it, my our third phase is called the SAGE phase. And that was when I started to get those material things back. I got a license, I got a car, I got a job, and I thought I had recovery in the bag. And I got some sanctions in that phase because I started getting those things that I lost back, and I put my recovery on the back burner for a while.
Oh, so you started feeling good and thought you had it.
Yeah.
Thought you knew everything.
And I answered Rhonda's question because It's a thing that I've learned to, it's a sage talk. And it is, it's a pattern sometimes, a lot of other people like get those things back that they've lost. And then they're like, all right, recovery's on the back burner. But even for myself personally, like recovery had to be number one, or I lose everything else.
Right. So we have a couple, thank you, Kylie. We have a couple more
Welcome.
questions in the question and answer box. Zach Brown is asking, how hard was it to feel not accepted around cultural activities early on in Wellness Court process? And at what point did you feel accepted around your culture and ceremonies? That's a good question. Thanks, Zach. Was there ever a point when, because one of the hallmarks of Healing to Wellness Court is engagement and incorporating culture, especially into that treatment process. And I always look at addiction as a holistic kind of disease, that it takes your mind, body, soul, and spirit. And so it takes your spirituality as well. And sometimes, you're not as involved in your, your culture or your community. I think what I've noticed in all the three of you that you have mentioned was reintegrating or getting back into just the community, just being able to go out and do things and see people and talk to people and just being part of the community is one of the things that I kind of noticed was a theme in each of your stories.
I'd also like to answer the question. It was really, really difficult to accept that I had let go of my culture and my traditions. It was really hard to, as my morals and my conscience was coming back, it was really hard to accept. It was depressing at first. I was upset about it. I was upset with myself about it. And it was hard to kind of feel like the outcast. We did have a lot of, at the treatment center I went to, they integrated a lot of cultural activities and being outside, trying to connect, being one with Mother Earth. And I had a very hard time with that at first. I really had to sit with myself. I really had to take my time with it. But something that did help and helped me start to feel accepted around my culture and the ceremonies was I wasn't given up on. Anytime I had questions or needed anything explained, I wasn't belittled. I was, I guess you could say, there were many people holding my hand when I needed it. They were able to talk to me, sit things down with me, and it was nice. And after being clean for so long, I started to feel like, okay, my body is clean enough, my mind is clean enough. I can start participating in the ceremonies and being a part of my culture again.
Nice.
It's a process.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Lou. That's a very good advice. So just have one more minute, couple minutes. The last question is, what is your advice for new Healing to Wellness Court participants? Advice for Healing to Wellness Court staff in dealing with the participants. So just if anybody has any parting nuggets of gold, please let us. I think because that for me that was always the $50 million question. So anybody, Francesca, Kylie, Lou.
Some advice that I would like to give for anyone starting with the Healing Wellness Court, I would have to say, just have patience. Patience is the biggest thing. Have patience for who's trying to help you, and also for the staff, have patience for who you're trying to help. They are coming out of a very dark place. The participants don't have any patience. It's really hard to come out of the shell you were in. You're down, and what do you want to do when you're scared? You want to defend yourself constantly, all the time, until you get into that safe space. So it's also a very long process. So I think for the participants, understand the staff, understand where they're coming from. They're trying to help you. You also need to put in effort as they are also putting in effort. It's very helpful to just let your guard down and understand that they are trying to help you, but you also need to help yourself.
Thank you. And I noticed in the chat box or in the question and answer box, Kylie also gave it a nice plug for being trauma informed, understanding the trauma that our participants will and possibly do have coming into Wellness Court, and which is a nice segue because that's our next session. So again, I want to thank Francesca, Kylie, and Lou for joining us today. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. We know that you have many options in your TTA and your webinar type kind of viewing. So we are very grateful and very happy that you've joined us today. We'd like you to, if you take a few minutes, please, we have a QR code and it's an evaluation. Please let us know anything that we could have done better, anything that we did well that you wanted to highlight. So if you could please take a few minutes to fill out our evaluation. And Chelsea has also dropped the link in the chat box if you want to copy that and answer that for us. So once again, thank you all for joining us, and thank you. And we hope to see you next week for our next session, and also hope to see you all. We hope that you tune in for our recorded session. So thank you very much. Angie, do you have any closing words?
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Nothing
Kylie.
further. Thank you all for joining us.
All right,
Have a
I've
good
gotta
afternoon.
go. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.